with my friend, and we were just talking, and she said, oh, hey, like, I was saying, like, oh, like, look at that white girl over there. Do you see her? And I wasn't going to drag her just for being white, but I wanted to identify her, right? Like, look at that white girl, look at her shoes, you know. And then she was like, why do you have to mention that she's white? What does it matter that she's white? Did Martin Luther King die for you to say that she's white? And I was like, listen, Mackenzie, all right? We are at my family's cookout in Harlem, in 125th Street. There are only 2 of you here. And both of you brought some whack-ass potato salad, so thanks.
All right, welcome to Well Damn Comedy, where local Connecticut comedians meet together and talk about comedy, and we refuse to shorten up our intro and write something better. I'm here tonight with Kendra Dawsey. She's been nice enough to come down and tell us a little bit about herself and her comedy. She's a reflective comedian and a self-respecting comedian, I would think, too.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, a little bit more than me, I think. She's not afraid to get real and make you laugh at the same time. So, Kendra, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Yeah,
great to see you. Great to see you again. Good to have you back. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you going in comedy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was interested in comedy probably from when I first started college. And when I first went to college, there was a lot of improv groups. And I tried out for all of them and didn't get into any. Mm-hmm. And then someone, so I can't do improv, but someone from one of the improv groups was like, oh, there's a sketch group that's all women. You should consider joining it. So I emailed them, and I eventually got into that group. So it was like an all-woman sketch comedy group. And I think some of my best memories in college were from working in that group and kind of developing things together with lots of other people. And that was one of the things where it kept my interest. And I mean, college there's a lot of different things going on, beyond classes, it's a lot of people drinking and trying to find themselves and things. But that was the one thing where I was like, wow, I want to keep doing this. So and then after that, I graduated and I was like, oh, I should concentrate on work, but I did want to keep pursuing the comedy. And most recently, and I had dabbled in stand-up throughout college, but not really taking it seriously. And then most recently, about a year ago, I got fired from a job, and I was like, if I'm not gonna do comedy now, I'm never gonna do it. So once I figured out I was fired, I'm like, I'm gonna go to open mic and just do this. Yeah. And it has been great since then.
Nice.
I really enjoy it.
Nice, that's great. Honestly, I'm in a funny way, I'm glad you lost your job because it gave you the inspiration to do it. I know myself, I had thought about it again in college and sort of thought about it for years. I don't actually really, I can't pinpoint a specific thing that pushed me over the edge. It just, I don't know, I stewed on it long enough, Yeah. But I think it's something that people can easily want to explore and never get into. Yeah. And it's a little sad, if you ask me to, just not even try it, So let's get a little more into detail. What would you say is maybe your favorite thing about doing comedy?
I think, I don't know if you agree, but I think talking to a lot of comics, we are all self-absorbed. I like being able to talk and have people listen to me, because I think growing up, there wasn't a lot of that, or I didn't feel like I was the type of person where I was like, oh, I had a lot of stuff to say, but I don't think people are really gonna listen. And I like being able to do that as a platform. I also like that stand-up comedy is an art, and I think it's not always seen as one, but when you think about it, it brings together both performance and writing. You have to have stage presence, and then also your jokes have to have a good formula. And I like having that project. I think I'm also the type of person where I do sometimes I like some collaborative processes, but doing things by yourself is nice because you're the one in charge mostly. But I've always liked performing, and I like being able to, I guess, any form of expression, but also to use this venue to talk about what I feel like or what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, well, you want to talk about what's on your mind, the things that you might not otherwise say. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
I think it was Jerry Morgan, he'd summed it up very well. Your whole life you have these sort of crazy ideas floating around in your head, and you kind of hide them away, or you feel like you shouldn't say them, and all of a sudden one day somebody gives you a microphone. Not only people listening, but they're laughing, you know, at the same thing you're laughing at, and it's a total realization in a way.
Yeah, and it is kind of like a rush. Like I don't think there's. I was talking about this with some other comedians, and they're like, I don't know why stand-up comedy as a profession exists. Like I'm rolling with it, but it is a very. There's not many other, I guess, other than politicians, but that also comes with a lot of responsibility. There's not many other avenues where you like literally are just talking. Yeah. And then people are like, oh, I'm going to listen to you because I expect entertainment. And it's kind of a rush from that sense of importance, which is completely overblown.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's one side of it. What's the worst part about doing comedy, or the hardest part, your least favorite part?
Yeah, that is a good question. So, I don't see my friends that often anymore. And it's also, I don't want to seem like I'm complaining. Like, it's obviously a choice I've made to go to open mics a lot. But I was talking to some other comics about this, and it can potentially be lonely or kind of isolating in some ways that you don't expect, I think, going in, especially if you don't. So I think I just kind of threw myself in, and I'm like, I'm going to do as much as possible. But if you have like a family or, you know, like relationships, like it is kind of stressful being able to balance, like, oh, there's this thing I really care about, which like is kind of a career I may not be earning money, but I want to get better at. And then I also want to see my friends and make sure that I'm able to see my friends.
Yeah, it's tough to balance. I mean, I found for myself, you know, and I have been kind of, you know, scaling it back a little bit just to make it more livable, because I threw myself into it more than, in a way, than my body could handle. Yeah. You can't do that few hours of sleep a night, and you know what I mean? And, you know, I mean, in myself, I'm out at a bar, I'm having a couple of drinks, you know? Yeah. And this and that, it's just, you know, and when I'm doing it every night of the week almost, after a while, it takes a toll on you, it takes a toll on the wallet. Yes. You know, and this and that. I've needed to kind of, okay, yes, you got really excited about it, you like it a lot, but find where it fits into your life, find the balance.
Definitely,
you know?
Yeah, and that's something I've been trying to do. Like there's some times where there was one time about maybe like last month where I had like 8 shows in a row, like 8 days in a row. And I realized by like the 7th or 8th show, I was like, wow, I am really tired and burnt out, and it's actually affecting my performance. I should probably not do anything comedy related for at least like 2 days.
Right, just give yourself a break from it.
It is an exhausting lifestyle. I think any sort of lifestyle where you're traveling a lot, whether you're like a musician or like politician or just if you have to move around a lot, it is tiring, and then you're at bars, so it's easy to drink a lot. It's not very healthy. You're not eating the greatest food,
you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know. I mean, dinner is going to be bar food most nights, you know, because that's where you are. That's where you're going to get food, you know.
Yes.
So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny. There's so a comic has started a stand-up comic weight loss competition that I'm participating in just because I wanted stage time, not because I actually think I'm overweight. Right. But I was like, oh, I'll not eat for stage time, whatever. But I was talking about it with a few other comics who are on the show, and we were like, do we stop drinking alcohol? So we'll just be at open mics and like not drink at all? Like, how is that gonna really change? And it is, and you're in bars all the time, so that's going to, it's not as easy as like just avoiding bars. Like that's a workplace.
It's right, exactly. It's part of the business that comes with it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. So what do you got working on? You're working on now. What do you got coming up? Is there anywhere that people could look to find you?
Yeah. So I have an Instagram. It's unamused black girl, spelt normally, no weird spelling, no spaces. And there you could find all my shows. So I promote shows through there. Also just silly things I do on the internet. That's where you can find all my info. I also have a Facebook page. It's just my name, Kendra Dossi. And that's where you can find all my stuff. I have just been bouncing around New England, so if you live here, you could probably run into me.
Excellent, yes. If you guys are in the area, you want to check her out, that's where you can. So let's swap some war stories for a while. We've got a section on good open mic stories. Any good recent open mic stories? I
went to an open mic where there was a dog.
Ooh, that's interesting.
So I mean, that's not a war story. It was just really cute.
Right.
It was Quinn Trans open mic in New Britain, and she has a dog, and the dog just kind of like hangs out at the mic, and the dog doesn't like people clapping for whatever reason. So if like people are clapping, he'll start barking. That's one of the most recent things. I think one of the places where I feel like has made me kind of tougher and not as sensitive to lack of reaction from the audience is probably Keegan's. This is a mic in Middletown. And usually people just aren't paying attention.
Yeah.
So you learn how to get there. So I've just started like shouting at people like, hey, were you watching? And so that's kind of like the comedian's gym.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah, I've done a lot of open mics like that. It's tougher when it's just comics.
That's also true.
When it's people in the audience not paying attention, that kind of thing, I think it's warranted. I think it's a good thing to do. For me to yell at a comic that has seen me working on all this material, trying to get a reaction, it's not going to do me any good.
No, that's very true. Like
that can be if nothing else, it's a good exercise in just staying confident while you're up there. You go into it knowing, okay, there's 5 people left. I'm going up last or whatever. It's largely not going to be heard. But there's just something about staying confident and just saying those words in front of people into a microphone and just working on your timing, your this and that, and not letting it affect you.
Yes.
You might not get the audience reaction you're looking for.
Yeah.
But it's still practice. It still makes you a little bit stronger as a comic.
Yeah, and that's the important part. So even if there's a mic with all comics and I'm like, they've heard this stuff like 20 times.
Right. Yeah.
I still do it just to get that practice. Or even if I'm trying to tweak the words in a joke, even if it's a joke everyone's heard, but I'm like, oh, if I put this one word over here, it
right,
will be
yeah.
helpful. But yeah, there's definitely comics, fellow comics in the scene where I feel like I probably know their set, and if I see them at a mic and they're performing, I'll do that thing. So I think I seem like a jerk when I do this, but I will be on my phone, but I will be listening, and I'll just like kind of multitask, and I'll be like, oh, this is the part where they reference Tinder. Like, does this Tinder joke land in this place? Oh, it didn't work. That's okay. Like, all right, let me see how else they're doing as I'm like scrolling through Twitter.
Right.
And that's not because I don't think they're funny. It's just like I know their set, and I have a low attention span, but it's not against them.
And in a way, it's a habit us comics get into too. I mean, when you are doing a show and not necessarily a mic, while you're quiet and respectful and this and that, you have your set list in your head and you're thinking about how you're going to do. You're thinking about how the audience is reacting. Your head is a million other places.
Definitely.
Yes, you're listening. Yes, you're quiet. Yes, you're respectful, and you're going to react to the jokes you like and this and that. But even aside from having seen it before, there's just so much going on in your head that has to do with what you're about to do, that it does take you away from it a little bit, I think. Yeah,
I feel like I come off as a jerk before my set at shows because I'm just so wrapped up and like, I'm like thinking about the performance and I'm like, oh, like, should I tell this joke? What's the crowd? I'm just thinking about all these variables so that I don't really want to engage with people. And then after my set is done, I'm like, oh, hi, what's your name?
Yeah.
And it's not the people I'm on the show with. I just get like, I guess performance anxiety, or that's my kind of place to get game face. But I know people who are like, they can have a conversation about, I don't know, the death penalty.
Yeah.
And then they'll just go on stage, do their jokes, and come back.
Yeah. It is funny. Some people are like that. I'm much more like yourself, and I tend to smoke a lot of cigarettes just so I can get outside, get away from people. I will be sociable and I will talk to people and be very pleasant. But I need a couple of minutes. I'll go outside and just take 5 minutes and just settle my head down, because I just need to kind of get in the right mental zone for myself. You know. And then there are other people that are they're running around all night. I have no idea how they do it. If you ever do any hosting, or if you've done any hosting,
I've done hosting.
It can be a little like that, and it can kind of throw you off a little bit. Because you're trying, especially if you're not just hosting, but you're also in a sense producing the show. You know what I mean? And you're responsible for people's times and this and that and what have you. There's a lot going on in your head that can throw you right off of your performance.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's a good challenge, though.
Yeah, someone asked me what the difference was hosting a show and then just performing on it, and I was like, when you host a show, you are stressed out the entire time, and then when you just are performing on a show, you are no longer stressed out after your performance. But like you just keep mindful, and then you're like, oh, I have to think of like witty, like 1 minute things to say in between people's set, and like keep the energy up, and there's just like lots of different things. But what would you say is the wildest like show preparation ritual you've seen someone do in comedy?
The wildest preparation ritual, well, other than somebody slugging Bud Lights and calling them milk. Just the one that actually stands out to me as maybe the oddest looking is John Carlo, and he doesn't really do it as much anymore. But I remember, I think probably the first time I did a show with him at Broadway in New York, and he did not say a word to anyone. He did not even really look up from his notebook, and sat there with headphones on and just going over his set, and he had a great set. I think the work showed. Yeah. But it was really kind of weird. A couple of people had commented on it, like, is he just going to do that the whole time or whatever? But that's what he needed to do to get in the zone. He tuned out the entire world. Yeah. And even his comics are commenting on it and cracking a joke about it. It's like he didn't even hear it whether he did or not,
Yeah, exactly. And like sometimes that's what you have to do.
Oh yeah.
I've done that before, like, or I'll have one headphone in and I'll listen to a set and like have my notebook. But yeah, I think it's also interesting because there are some comics that do come from a theater background, and I'm not like a great actress. I just did theater in high school and like was in musicals. But seeing the amount of preparation that people do for like a theater performance or a play, and then the amount of preparation that people do for comedy is interesting because they're both on stages and they're both are performance. But I guess theater is more collaborative. But there was in high school we used to sing along to this like audio recording about the diversity of a curse word, which I can't say, but we would literally just repeat after the tape, and that was a way to get everyone de-stressed, like after we were in our costumes and had makeup done and stuff.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's kind of interesting. Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, I could see a huge difference in that regard between theater and comedy, in that it is more collaborative. You have, in a way, other people to look to if you get a little lost, or and you're kind of all working together in a way that helps to keep you on track. I mean, if I take something that, if I'm changing around my set list and I normally do this joke before this joke before this joke, and I'm changing around the order because I think it might work better and I'm trying it for the first time, there's that half a second in my mind where I'm ready to go into the next joke, and no, we're going here, and then we're going back there, and it just that. Even you can't even really see it, you can't even really tell. It throws me off a little bit. And I think that does show a little bit. Whereas with the whole collective production, maybe is a little harder to see those little things going on.
Well, I think it's so. I've seen comics like even before I did comedy. And I think people as long as people are laughing, then it's like then you're like, oh, they're thinking of a joke, but you're not like, oh, their set isn't tight,
Right, yeah,
I don't think there's the same level of like scrutiny. But even with like musicians, like there have been shows of my friends that I've seen, and I was like, wow, you were great, and they were like, really, we messed up this entire song. Why are you lying? My bass was not tuned the entire time, and it's just like, as an audience member, you don't notice because you're just happy that people are performing.
Yeah, in a way, you're always going to be your own worst critic. You know?
Exactly.
And I mean, it's like listening to the sound of your voice. When you hear yourself on a voicemail, it's like, oh God, is that what I sound like? Oh, gee.
Oh yeah, I had to get used to that doing comedy. Like the way my voice
you
sounds.
listen to your tapes and this and that, and it's just like, oh God, okay, I have to stomach this now. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a funny thing. You don't notice it about yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, let's move into the next section. So you want to talk a little bit about politics and comedy.
Yeah. Two of my favorite things. So I wanted to talk about it because I think the comedy that I kind of grew up on has always been, if not explicitly political, but then it would reference just like the world around us, or like make jokes. And I would say, like, I don't really talk about the president or like the administration that much, but I think it's hard to have material that isn't talking about the like problems I face as just like the person I am, or like, and that I guess there's like an older like feminist saying, the personal is political. And I think to some degree when we think about comedy, I think it can be true. And even like where you're starting out a joke from, it could be. So you have a joke about how ridiculous it is that you need to get a permit for rainwater, to use rainwater. Right?
Yeah, to collect rainwater or whatever, right?
Yeah. Like, and I don't think a lot of people would be like, oh, that's a Republican or Democrat joke or whatever, but it is. But that's like a political issue that you need to go through bureaucracy to use something that comes from the sky.
Right.
So, and I think there's also has been a big tradition of like political commentators in comedy, and not just like the Jon Stewarts and Trevor Noahs, but one person who I've been listening to his tapes more and more is Dick Gregory, and he was a comic that was prominent in like the 1960s around the civil rights era, and he's a black man, I think from Missouri, like somewhere in kind of that, like not all the way south, but southernish area. And he just had a lot of jokes about like not being allowed into a store. I mean, like it wasn't like he was telling like, oh, I'm not allowed into a store, but he would have a joke and the punchline was like, oh, he's not allowed in the store or something.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I just think it's very interesting, and I see comedians. I mean, I think there's some people who can be apolitical with their comedy, and there's things that are funny that are not partisan at all, but I think it's also, like, I guess speaking for me personally, it would be so strange for me not to comment on anything that's been happening, not even like since Trump has been in office, but like the past 10 years since. So that's kind of my background with it. But I also do like talking about politics, or I think it's important. I wouldn't say like, that makes it sound like it's a hobby, but I do want to be informed as much as possible, and like I try to think about these things, even though it pains me. It's funny. I joke with people sometimes that I do comedy because people would laugh at me when I would yell at the TV. Exactly. Yeah.
But it's hard for me not to get charged up about this kind of stuff. It's hard for me not to talk about this kind of stuff. I mean, in a way, I can be a little cynical because I'm not living it every day, because it's just going to aggravate me too much.
Yeah.
To look too closely at it is just going to tick me off too much. And this and that. But I think that you maybe have a similar outlook with your comedy, where you do some introspective jokes, but a lot of it is observations about the world around you. And I think that while sometimes you can avoid being political if you really go out of your way, a lot of times you're just going to stumble across it talking about the world.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think the political climate nowadays is so charged, where like someone will say like, oh, you're white, and then that's considered a like strong like political statement, noticing that someone's race. So I think it's also hard to like not be considered political sometimes, or like not have that framework over things. But yeah, there's lots. I mean, if you walk outside, everything that's shaped around us is probably like through government, if not, climate or whatever.
Oh,
so
yeah.
To me, it's hard to avoid.
It is, yeah, I agree, yeah. And I mean, in a way, current events, has always kind of had a way of influencing comedy.
Yeah.
And in a way, comedy has been able to to comment on things, and I think bring light to a lot of things that we're all thinking. And one of the things we were going to look at is people, like, let's say somebody that watches Jon Stewart for their news, are they just getting a one-sided angle? Are they hearing what resonates with them? Are they seeing things more objectively? What do you think are the positives and the negatives, let's say, of comedy and its effect on politics, and vice versa? Oh yeah,
that's an excellent question. I think one thing that has happened I think this is also like my blind spot. Like I haven't really watched The Daily Show in a while, and it's not because I'm like, oh, I'm above that. I don't have cable. But I did grow up on it, and I think I also like grew up in a left or like liberal leaning household because my parents were black people from New York City. Like there's the high likelihood that we're gonna be Democrats. So I think because of that, I just don't really know about the other side. Like I don't know if there's like Republican equivalents of Jon Stewart. And I think.
Yeah, but they're not funny.
Well, and I mean, so like I think I would watch a Republican equivalent of Jon Stewart, and I wouldn't be judging him just on his comedy, but also the politics of it. So I'd be like, oh, the framework of this joke is implying that, let's say, like all black women are on welfare. That's just a random example. And then I'd be like, okay, I disagree with that. I see like why that stereotype is harmful. They're like, and now at this point I can't really laugh at the joke, right? Or I guess I like can't, but I would be the type of person where I'm like, oh, that's wrong, and I'm mad that you're trying to say it, or not mad like at him, but just like, so I mean, I do see the argument that I think some people have where like a lot of media is more liberal and then they feel like they're alienated from media. But I think all people from everywhere could be alienated from media, and like I've considered myself left of liberal, and you can't really, like, socialist has just recently become not a negative term. Like there was a time in American politics where if you said socialism, people would say, oh, you're a commie.
You're a communist, right.
And you love Vietnam and you should just move over there, and like not really, whereas in other countries, I think there was more of a tradition of open discussion around all forms of economic things. So like someone say socialist and someone would be like, oh, I'm like a narco-communist, or oh, I'm a Marxist, or like, and you could just talk about it. Yeah, I know this is a long-winded answer. I don't know if there's like a set thing like, oh, like it's a good effect or bad effect. I think it is. I think so. Just the way I think the way I deal with some of the stress of the current world, because I've been trying to write a joke about this. Like we could all agree that things aren't going well, no matter what we think the cause is. And I have a joke about people thinking that like there's Jewish reptiles controlling the media. Obviously not true. But I think the way that a lot of people deal with it is through humor, and you've seen that a lot on the internet where there has been a rise, and this is just from me being on Facebook often, there has been a rise in like jokes or memes that they're not going to like flesh out a political argument, but they do have this like overlay of political commentary. So someone, like, there's one actually comedian, his name is Jabuki Young White, and on Twitter, his jokes are just like all about being a millennial who lives under capitalism, and they're funny. Like they'll also like reference like a famous actress or as he's making these jokes, but it does have that kind of overlay. So I think people use it as like a de-stressor. I don't think I don't know how politics or comedy has affected politics. I don't know. I feel like, and before we were just talking about this, and this is probably not going to be as relevant, but even just the reaction of journalists and everyone to Michelle Wolf's recent White House correspondent dinner performance, I found that interesting because she is a comedian, like comedians could speak truth to power, but ultimately she's not going to have the same power as like the president or like anyone else in that room. But they still felt so threatened by her being like, "Oh, you guys lie," that they released a released like a press statement about like, "Oh, this is vulgar, this is too much," and there's been all this discourse. And
to me, what's funny is that that's almost moving backwards. For decades and decades and decades, comedians have been pushing the limit, and it has gone from where people kind of knew JFK and Maryland had a thing, but nobody said anything about it. Nobody was going to say, you didn't talk about that kind of thing. To now where you wouldn't even want that implication because you're going to get slammed on late night TV. Well, even if it wasn't true, you avoid that kind of stuff so much. So it keeps them on their toes a little bit, just to know that there's somebody out there that is going to go for the throat and is not going to hold back and is going to give it to them. It's a joke whether it's it's 100% literal or not, right? It doesn't need to necessarily be a great political dialogue, but just a good punchline based around Trump's hair. I mean, I would love to see him turn red. I would just love to see someone say it to his face and see him turn red. Because there's nothing he can do to deny the truth in that.
And exactly. And it's and comedy has been a way of kind of speaking of like having people who are not in political systems be able to speak out, be given a platform to talk about their ideas, even if the audience doesn't necessarily agree. It's a way. It can be a way to promote more dialogue. I think it has that potential.
So we're running a little short on time. So let's circle back around, and why don't you just tell everybody just again as a reminder where they can find you, where they can see some stuff coming up from you.
Yeah. So you can go to my Instagram. It's unamused black girl. It's based on a meme I made in college, or the name is. I don't have the meme anymore. And then my Facebook is just Kendra Dossie. I have a Facebook page. There's a picture of me and it says, "This is art" underneath it. That's my profile because I am art.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Kendra.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming down.
Yeah.
And thanks, guys, for joining us.